So, the speaker I decided to go with for my TED Talk tonight is David Byrne. He's a Scottish-born musician and has dealt with music throughout his professional life, most notably known as the frontman and guitarist of the band The Talking Heads. For his TED Talk, he's raising the question, does the venue make the music? So, how did David capture the attention of the audience? He starts off his presentation first by giving the audience a quick story of his history with the venue in which this TED Talk was occurring. Immediately after his introduction, he plays a short sound clip to the audience to hold on to their attention as he continues to talk. Throughout his talk, David Byrne was able to engage the audience through a couple of senses. He used a slideshow of various pictures that all have something to do specifically with the type of venue he's talking about at the moment. With most of these pictures, he would play a quick audio sample to give an example of the music that would be played in the venue, as well as to give the audience an idea of what type of music would sound like in this venue. He would also help bring the audience in to give them a more personal connection by telling his personal stories every now and then, as well as keeping it lighthearted and throwing in a quick joke throughout his talk. There are quite a few of the commandments that Ted adheres to pretty well, the biggest one being the 9th commandment. 9th commandment says, "Thou shalt not read thy speech," and David has the speech entirely memorized. He didn't need any note cards or cues to remember what he was talking about. A couple of the others that he stuck to pretty well were the 8th, which is for laughter, and the 4th, which is about storytelling. One that he slightly infringed on was the 7th commandment, which is to not sell from the stage, but I wouldn't really count it as infringing. At the beginning of the talk, he used an audio clip from his band, The Talking Heads, but it was simply that, an intro to show who he was, and he didn't say anything to try and entice people to go buy the records of the band or anything of that sort. So David seemed pretty dynamic with his talk. He was very engaging with the audience. He used hand movements throughout his talk, never putting his hands in his pocket or crossing his arms. More importantly, he was constantly walking around on the stage. Now, he wasn't running all over the place like a madman, but he was moving around at a nice pace, allowing the audience to keep track of him and allowing him to hold their attention without seeming boring because he is moving around. Even better was his eye contact. He constantly scanned the audience and would focus here and there in different areas and never looked back at the screen. Overall, David's body language worked very well and kept your attention. Inflection of his voice was also very good. He emphasized important key moments here and there. I feel that David's overall talk reflected more on Nancy Duarte's style of presentation. He was very auditory, playing various sound clips and interspersing personal stories within his talk to help the audience connect, and throwing in jokes here and there in order to keep the audience's attention without them getting bored. As far as the slides he was using for his presentation, they did remind me very much of Gar Reynolds' Zen design in a sense, in that his entire slideshow was composed of only pictures that specifically had to do with what he was talking about. So none of his photos were metaphoric in that sense, but they were very representative, and there is no text to be found anywhere in the slides, which is what reminded me the most of Gar's design style. So, what have I learned from watching this speaker? Knowing exactly what you're talking about helps a great deal for what you're talking. When you know it well enough to not need note cards and have your speech memorized, it makes you look like you know exactly what you're talking about. Makes you sound more educated on the subject you're talking about and keeps you from looking like a fool on the subject. As far as what can anyone else take from the presentation, one of the most important things you can take away from the talk is how important body language is. It can help make or break your presentation. Make good use of your hands and what you're looking at. Make sure you're looking at the audience and scanning them while you settle on certain audience areas. If you have bad body language and are fidgety while you talk, it makes you look like you aren't sure about what you're talking about, or possibly even lying about the subject. But if you have good body language, then it makes you look like you know what you're talking about, you're confident in yourself, and you don't have to make up anything as you go. The audience feels like you already have everything prepared ahead of time, even if you're able to come up with everything on the fly.